that was being tackled. You see, we were faced with those issues when I was in government, but the issue of the constitutional amendment is very critical. It's very important under this circumstance so that local governments can have adequate resources to handle their issues. But that's when I said that there was need also for the federal government really to sit down with all the stakeholders, state governors, and everybody, whether the same party or not, we are serving the same people. So that at the end of the day, every level of government, the federal, the state, and even the local governments can do their own version of the constitutional responsibilities. So we believe in NNPP that there should be finances that should go direct instead of the joint account that we see today to the local governments so that they can function effectively together with the federal government and, of course, the state governments.
Thank you very much indeed. We have considerably more clarity on that issue. Let me come to you, Mr. Peter B. We're going to change gears now and move on to another topic. With everything from poverty, culture, economic upheaval, climate change, and insecurity pushing the education crisis in Nigeria to the brink, unprecedented action is needed to dramatically improve education and get millions of children back into school, especially in northern Nigeria. What will you do as president to reverse the growing number of out-of-school children in this country? And you've got 2 minutes to answer that question.
Well, you have to look at what we have been able to do so far in education at the federal and state level. But talking about the federal level now, our investment in education is low compared to even comparable countries. If you look at it, let me just use 2016 to date, 6 years, to 2021. Our investment, our total investment in budget in education at the federal level is about 3.6 trillion, just 3,550 billion. That's our investment for 6 years. That is not up to South African, which is second biggest economy, or about the same for 1 year. In 2020, their budget for education was 380 billion rands. If you convert these two, you will see the difference. So you need to invest more. And if you look at their own, it was about between 14 and 16%. All throughout these 6 years, our budget is not up to 10% in education. There's no way that can happen with the pool of people we have out of school. For me, Nigeria can design their budget differently. If we work hard in this country, I believe Nigeria can, if they pluck all revenues, be able to get a revenue of about 15 trillion annually. And if they are borrowing, not throwing away to subsidy and other areas and curtailing cost of governance, they borrow about maybe another 10 trillion. You need about 25 trillion budget to start with. And 10% of that should go to education. And 10% to the other areas which we're going to come into. We're going to invest in education. We're going to do whatever is possible to ensure that we pull those millions of children and ensure they get basic education, which is the most important.
Okay, and that was dead on time again. Thank you very much indeed. And just to mention that we're going to come back to both of you, Mr. Kwankwaso and Mr. Abubakar, with this question, but I'm going to go over to Abuja now and bring back, okay, I'm told that they're not quite ready in Abuja, so let me come to you, Waziri Atiku Abubakar, with that same question. What will you do as president to reverse the growing number of out-of-school children in this country?
I tried to do that when I was a vice president, particularly with the northern states. I commissioned a special study which was made by a committee headed by Professor Adamu Baiki, a foremost educationist, in Ahmadu Bello University. And as a result of that, we produced a handbook on how the northern states can catch up as far as education is concerned. It requires more investment. Like Peter said, we are not investing enough in education. And because it particularly concerned the northern states, I called all the northern governors in Kaduna and gave them a copy of the report and how to implement it. I think not a single governor implemented that report. But then we don't have a way to force them to implement it because they are sub-regional, entities which have their own authority in the Constitution. Our own was just to advise them. So it requires really additional funding and infrastructure to be able to bring up the numbers as far as the northern states are concerned, and therefore provide a productive population. Because all this talk about poverty, unemployment, and so on and so forth, once you increase investment in education and you provide the right type of education, you are going to solve the poverty issue.
Thank you very much indeed. And let me come to you, Mr. Rabiu Kwankwaso, to also answer that question. We need dramatic improvement, as I'm sure you know, and you've mentioned that already, dramatic improvement to education in this country, getting millions of children back into school, especially in northern Nigeria. What will you do as president to reverse the growing number of out-of-school children in this country?
Thank you very much. Let me just comment on what Waziri said about being fairness to PDP. I believe that Nigerians are very fair to PDP over the years. I only want to remind him that he led us out of PDP in 2013-14 because PDP was very bad at that particular time. And we went and formed APC. Unfortunately, APC to many people today is not as good as we expected, me and him. And at the end of the day, we came back to the very PDP that we decided to leave. To us, and I'm sure to many Nigerians, especially the PDP people, they believe that, yes, PDP was bad, but APC is very bad. And many people believe that PDP plus APC is what we have seen today in this country, the issues that we are discussing. Anyway, that is just by the way. But the issue of education, we believe that more investments should be made in education. We will encourage private people to set up facilities, primary, secondary, and tertiary. I have to thank Waziri. He has an institution, university, which is a very good thing. The only thing is that he should try and make the fees and so on much lower so that our team and supporters, Nigerians, as many as possible, can join the university. So we are going to do whatever it takes to ensure that education, right from the issue of that was raised, I thought we will be given opportunity to talk about ASU. But I want to say that...
We will talk about that.
Okay.
You've got about 10 seconds to round off.
We will do all what it takes, really, to ensure that each and every child in this country will be given the opportunity to go to school at all levels. And that's why in our manifesto we decided to say that all forms, especially
I'm really sorry
that
to interrupt you, sir, but we are out of time. You did speak about the PDP originally at the outset rather than focusing on the issue. But you have made the point. So,
it is contrary to your ground.
With all due apologies, I'm afraid I have to interrupt you. But thank you very much indeed. And you will get the chance to talk about the ASU strike as you wanted later in the program. But let me take you to Abuja and to my colleague Adesua Omoruwan, who has some questions for the candidates. Adesua.
Thank you very much, Charles. Well, let's talk about that ASU that everyone has been eager to talk about tonight. The industrial action in the tertiary institutions in Nigeria have become almost as constant as should you become the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what deliberate actions would you take to ensure that this will become a thing of the past? May I begin with the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Atiku Abubakar.
Their salary structure and areas of their salary. The government must be prepared to invest more in running of our universities. And then we should also avoid a bottleneck in getting these funds to the right places, I mean to the universities. At the current system or current structure, there is a bottleneck. When government releases funding for the universities, it goes to another agency of the government. And that agency of the government now stifles the universities from getting this funding. Forget whether the funding is sufficient or not. I give you an example. When I was vice president, I visited a few foreign missions. I found that they were not receiving their salaries and allowances for months. They were not paying rent. The Minister of Finance then, the ministry, and each embassy submitted their budget. After it was approved, we now started wiring money straight to the embassies. And then we see people didn't like it, but that was the right thing to do. And then
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Atiku Abubakar. And that same question goes to you, Mr. Peter Obi. If you become president of Nigeria, how will you resolve these perennial strikes by ASU?
Well, as governor of Anambra State, I do have a very long and, these issues with ASU. And if you look at it today, when the ASU was on strike, the last strike, Anambra State University was among the few universities that were not on strike. And they said it was, they were not on strike. And they said it was, they were not on strike. And they said it was, because of the way I handled and what I did with them and in the past that made them to be like that. But overall, the funding of tertiary institutions in Nigeria needs to be restructured. It needs to bring a lot of mix where government will contribute. We have some deductions from private sector. Who needs these products? Who contribute? And bringing show of loans and everything. It's not something that I think federal government can continue funding the way they are funding it. What they need now is to go back to the agreement, clear the backlogs, and then design a sustainable funding mechanism, which is very easy. It's happened, we learn from what is happening in other countries of the world.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And we're going to go back to Adesua in a minute, but I think It's your turn, Rabiu Kwankwaso, to answer that question. If you become president of Nigeria, how will you resolve these perennial strikes by ASU?
Now, you see, the whole thing really goes around honesty, sincerity, and credibility. There are so many people, not only in the ASU, who are asking a lot of questions. In our own case, we'll try and be as transparent as possible. We'll carry everybody along. And as maybe you know, and I'm sure members of the ASU are aware, that even when I was governor of Kano State, our branch of ASU was taking permission not to go on strike because they believed that whatever was required at that particular time, we were doing it. In fact, when I was going back the second time, the ASU, the other institutions were on strike, were concerned about the situation at that particular time. But we carried them along. Now, I like figures, but you see some of these figures that government is putting. In our own opinion, many governments are not keeping their eyes. You do budget with trillions and trillions of naira, you keep your eyes away. Some of them will disappear even they go before the money goes to the ministry. And these are some of the issues that are triggering a lot of mistrust by the ASU and other organizations. In our own case, we'll do whatever it takes, not only to do the budget, but to keep our eyes on the budget so that money goes down, so that everybody will get his own, will earn his salaries and allowances, and of course do what he or she needs to do. So we'll do whatever it takes really to put the money, and not only that, to keep our eyes on the money so that everybody benefits in the sector. And I can assure you that in our manifesto, all those issues raised by ASU were very much addressed, especially the issue of ensuring that these universities are upgraded, are improved, are taken to the best international practice before we start proliferating the other universities and other tertiary institutions across the country. So we're on the same page with ASU if you look at our blueprint.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Kwankwaso. And I'm told that we're once again having those technical gremlins. They are attacking our systems, and we're having difficulty connecting with Adeshu Omorwan in Abuja. But let me just say that we're doing this sequentially. So we've gone from poverty to education, and now we're going to move on to healthcare. But before we move on to healthcare, let's complete that sequence on education. And I'm told that we have Adeshua Omorwan in Abuja. And it would be nice, Adeshua, if you can hear me, to try and limit the questions of the panelists to issues about education, so that when we finish, we will then move sequentially to the next topic, which is healthcare. Adeshua.
Thank you very much, Charles. You've done half my job just now. And just to remind our audience that we do have a panel of interviewers, including our civil society partners and, of course, 10 seasoned journalists here in our Abuja studios. And Charles, you're correct. The next panel member that would be asking the candidates a question is Professor Jide Ofor Adibe of the Center for Democracy and Development, our major partner for this Town Hall series. Please limit your question to education, and please project when asking your question. Thank you. To education.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, all. My question is about the crisis in the education sector. I think we tend to focus on the higher education, and we tend to a crisis in the lower segment, the primary and secondary schools. It seems to me that the deterioration in our education system, or the crisis, is more pronounced there, and the decline is proportionate to the growth of privately owned schools. And right now, there's hardly any elite that sends their children to the public schools. So what you have now is that the public schools that feed the higher institutions of learning are in crisis. The quality is so low that when they feed the higher education system, the quality of the graduates themselves are also quite low. So my question is, how are you going to address the imbalance where, for example, people in nurseries, in private schools pay higher tuition than postgraduate and graduate students in public-owned universities? If you become the president, and I'm directing it to the three presidential candidates, if you become the president, how are you going to revert the decline in the public education system, especially at the lower levels?
Said that question to any particular candidate, so I will take the liberty of stepping in and directing that question to Waziri Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party.
Again, thank you very much. I still want to go back, to the experience and performance of the PDP. We passed the law setting up the Universal Basic Education Scheme, where we made it compulsory for every Nigerian child to be educated from primary to secondary school level. Every Nigerian child. And also impose education tax on some segment of Nigerian, population or economy. We pass the entire proceeds of that taxation to the states and local governments. I think we should begin to see, or we should begin to find out, why is it not we have not got the impact that legislation was meant to achieve? Where did we go wrong? But I believe, with that education tax law and with the funding given to the states and local governments, we should have been able to do better than we have done.
Right, okay. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Abubakar. And let me come to you, Rabiu Kwankwaso, with the same question.
Thank you very much. Well, he talked about crisis in education. I think the crisis is everywhere. It's not only in education. We have crisis in the economy. We have crisis in the security. We have crisis in infrastructure, agriculture, and so on and so forth. But if we go for the education, our administration believe that the best way to go is to support education massively, as much as the government can be able to do. And not only that, we carry our brothers and sisters at the state and of course at local government level, bearing in mind the constitutional provision of what those levels of government are supposed to do. So we work harmoniously. We put in a lot of resources. We bring in a lot of reforms. We ensure that issue of corruption is being tackled, because that is the main problem in almost all the sectors today, in all the areas. Everywhere, not only in the sector of education. I remember this visit where we went to France and America. The other time when I traveled out of this country to the United Kingdom, I was really shocked at the airport how people were following us, literally asking us that we had to give them money and so on. That is aviation, not education. So these are the areas that every responsible government must tackle to ensure effectiveness of the sectors, especially the area of education.
Thank you very much indeed. And before we return to Abuja and to Adeshua Omorowan, let me give you the opportunity, Mr. Peter B., to answer the same question.
Well, like I said at my introduction message, education is among the three measurements of HDI is most critical, because like I say, the driver of the other ones. And when you talk about the education, you talk about basic education. And when we say our education is in crisis today, It is that basic education. Even when you talk about out-of-school children in the north, the 20 million out-of-school children, which 60%, if you look at it, is women, which we need to deal with urgently in order to bring that sector back to. What you need to do, apart from having increased investment, like I said, in education, is to also have increased supervision and ensuring that the resources are well utilized, working in partnership with the states and local governments. Because when you talk about out-of-school children in the north, these are children who have learned Quran. If they can learn Quran, that means they're intelligent. I will meet them at where they are learning Quran and teach them skill. With that, you'll be able to. As for what we are going to do in education, all I can tell anybody is go and see what we did with the primary school and secondary schools in Anambra State. In fact, in Anambra State, people prefer to put their children in public school rather than private school. I went to Christ, let me use my secondary school, Christ the King College. People queue up now to be able to go be admitted there.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Peter Obi. And if Abuja is ready, we will return to my colleague Adesua Omoruwan there. I think we're still dealing with issues, the stark issues to do with education in this country. But obviously, Adesua, if your panelists have done with that, feel free to move on to the next topic, which is healthcare. Adesua.